Our society isn't just ignoring men, it's actively breaking them. If you're a man who's been dragged through family court, called dangerous just for being a dad, or told your masculinity is toxic, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Why are men being erased from their homes, their kids' lives, and even from the conversation about what it means to be a man? In this episode, we're exposing the silent war on fathers, dismantling the myth of toxic masculinity, and showing you how to become the circuit breaker that your family so desperately needs. This conversation came from one of my recent appearances on the Exposing the Narrative podcast. Let's go get into it.
Andrew, welcome, mate. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's jump straight into it, mate. What inspired you to create The Man Show, mate? And how has your personal journey influenced the content that you share?
Yeah, great question. Well, I started on YouTube a couple of years ago, and it was part of a whole career change that I was going through, which I'll get to in a moment. But started with a YouTube channel where I was doing a mixture of different things, leadership-related stuff and, all kinds of different training. And then it just became apparent the deeper I went on that journey, and social media platforms like TikTok as well, it just became really obvious the huge need that was there for more content focused around helping men. And so I made the pivot to go, right, let's make all this content on this channel around men's needs and what their challenges are in today's world. And then we had the name change to Man Show, as you mentioned, and all the rest of it. My own vocational background is in the not-for-profit space. So I did a lot of work in community services, in training programs, in public speaking. And I realized as a result of that I've actually had almost 25 years of developing content and training materials that had actually been very successful in helping guys to recover from various traumas or, keep their family together, become better dads, do better in their own vocational journey, and, really quite abnormally high statistics in the positive sense compared to across the rest of society. So I realized I was sitting on some very helpful content and thought I really need to go all in on this and help a lot of our men out there who, as we know, are really struggling because of a few key issues that they're facing right now.
Yeah, no, well said, mate. And personally, for a bloke that's been in a battle for about 10 years now regarding starting in the family court system, it's refreshing to find content that is solely based around the needs of men without being made to feel like you're a misogynist because you want support and you want to be surrounded by other men that have experienced the similarities that you have through life. So, no, I appreciate what you've done, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I say it all the time, whether it's on the channel or in conversations with blokes. We don't need to be anti-women in order to be pro-men.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I try to get away from and help other guys to get away from, and ladies as well for that matter, is this notion that's going on everywhere around the world right now where people are being grouped into groups instead of being held accountable for their individual actions. And so I'm going to keep on banging that drum as hard as I can as well. I get the fact that there are a few bad men out there. There's also some bad women out there. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we've got to throw the entire gender in the bin. And so I really want to push that message hard too, that if a person has got actions that show that their character's flawed, well, let's have that person be accountable instead of grouping them into a massive group so that we can put one big, lazy, sticky label on the whole group and then punish them all.
No, bloody well said, Andrew. And, mate, true gender equality starts with mutual respect for men and women, mate, doesn't it?
Exactly.
No, I agree. All right, mate. You've addressed issues like fatherlessness and male suicide. What systemic changes do you advocate for, and how do you think we can, address these and get political support?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a huge field, as you know, and so many guys know by experience or by direct involvement. I think one of the things that has to happen, and I'm starting to see a few signs that it is happening, and that is we need a growing number of voices, whether they be face-to-face, whether they be on platforms like this, whether they be in public meetings, a growing number of voices who point out the obvious, that the system we've got is broken. And to say it loud and courageous, it is broken. And a lot of people are stuck, as we know, just on the gender warfare side of it, or men do this, or women do this. Well, Those things may sporadically be true or not, but the big problem is the damage that's been caused is to children and family units as a whole. And so our system is broken, and I personally believe that elements of it are broken by design. It's not accidental breakage. I believe some of it's premeditated breakage with an agenda. And so we have to speak up and we have to call out what is wrong, what is broken. And one of the most obvious things legislatively that's got to be advocated for is that when, very sadly, a partnership or a marriage breaks up and there are children involved, the default response should be that the time and the custody with the children is automatically set at 50-50. And there needs to be a serious and watertight case against the father or the mother. And I don't mean just a loose allegation, an actual watertight case that one of those parties is unable to provide safe and steady parenting. And unless that's present, every other allegation and label should be thrown out for the children's sake. But I think what's going on is a lot of people in these places are using their position of power to try and push their own agenda from their own traumas and their own hurts in their history. And they're using other people's families as, like pawns on a chessboard. And so that's the first thing we've got to do is we've got to push hard with politicians, with people of influence, with community leaders and say what's going on is not only not good enough, it's damaging people deluxe. And children are always on the receiving end of it. We've got to advocate for better legislation. Then hopefully, maybe we can get to addressing some of the challenges in why as a society, why are we doing so poorly with our marriage divorce rates? Why are we doing so poorly with dealing with historic traumas and these kinds of things, and hopefully get to that stuff down the road?
That, mate, well said, well articulated. Any wonder you're running the Man Show, mate. You can break things down better than most that I've spoken to. So
thank you.
Just to touch on that, Andrew, you're 100% right that the end game is, I believe, and I support what you said, that it's the attack on the family unit. But the quickest way to do that is to remove the masculinity and to make him feel bad for being a protective, for being a caring and loving, providing father, isn't it? I mean, once he's out of the picture, that opens the family up for just basically control.
Yeah, 100%. Look, this is what you've touched on there is a huge conversational field, and it's important that we explore it, not just here today, but in so many spaces, because as I alluded to a moment ago, there are portions of our legislative environment, there are portions of our political environment, there are portions of society at large, and it is portions. It's not all of it, but we have to say that these portions do exist who have an agenda against men. It's metastasized feminism. Some people call it the third wave of feminism. Call it whatever you want. It's an evil hatred of men and masculinity that's in some parts of our society. It certainly runs rife in the left media, and it runs rife in some pockets of political circles and other areas. And to deny its existence is head in the sand, childish ignorance, because it's apparent everywhere. And as you touched on, the goal is remove men, remove masculinity, because if you remove masculinity, and I'll touch on what I mean by that word in a moment because it's on my channel all the time, but if we remove masculinity, we make the family and the family unit vulnerable to being destroyed. And that's the point, because a society and a country that doesn't have good men present in the mix of all decision-making is a country that's easily monopolized, and people are turned into lemmings that will just do as they're told. Good, courageous, strong men are the damn wall that tsunami breaks on every single time through history. And so when we talk about masculinity, it's so important that we talk about it in its original definition, its original meaning, because it still applies today. And it's the reason why I will continue to rebut this pointless hybrid language of toxic masculinity. You can't add adjectives to the word masculinity because the word masculinity is already conclusive in its definition. It means to protect, provide, and empower. Full stop, end of story. There's nothing else added to it. So when we talk about toxic behavior, that's fine. When we talk about toxic traits of humanity, that's fine, because that's the men and the women. But to say toxic masculinity is just another expression of lazy language from lazy people who've got an agenda where they want to put sticky labels on groups so that they can succeed in having allegations against groups, and then they can penalise them for their sins as those other people sit there as the Lord God Almighty judging everything. So when we talk about masculinity as blokes, we need to push hard against that phrasing of toxic masculinity and reject it and say, no, there are toxic traits of all people from all backgrounds, but the word masculinity, it is defended and existential by itself. It has a complete meaning. You don't need to add to it or take from it. It means protection, provision, and empowerment. And this is why we see people trying to damage that word in society, because they know if we have original masculinity, the family is safe, the world is safe. It can't be controlled by people with evil agendas.
Yeah, no, well said, mate. And I shared a thing the other day that said a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is
exactly
a dangerous man who holds his violence under voluntary control. So that's a pretty good description of what masculinity, in my opinion.
Absolutely. You look at the stats, Daniel, in particularly Western nations, and they're everywhere. They're not hard to find. But the stats around what you touched on before, fatherlessness, the crime rates, the incarceration rates, the addiction rates, and more skyrocket when you remove the presence of a father from a child's life. Now, I'm not for a moment inferring that every man is a good father. Every man should be striving to be, and most men are striving to be a good father. But the point is, you remove the father from that family unit, from those relationships, children's lives go to hell in a heartbeat. That's the fact of the matter. And the other thing that's interesting to note is that case studies are now beginning to appear that have studied the histories of pedophiles who've been incarcerated. And a common theme that comes up when they are questioned and interrogated about their targeting tactics. And it's an unpleasant subject, but it illustrates an important point. When they get questioned about which children they would target, the common theme that always comes up is they would target children from a fatherless home or where the father in the home was weak and anemic.
Yep.
So to your point, a strong, courageous man who presents some kind of threat, when he controls it, like Jordan Peterson talks about, learn to become a monster and then control it, that kind of man is good for everybody.
Yeah, well, I think I speak for most dads that I've spoken to, and from my personal opinion too, is without a shadow of a doubt, if you hurt my children, that's the last child you'll ever
Totally. Totally.
And again, it's ingrained into most of us, isn't it? That's something
it is.
Strive to protect our family and our children especially. So, no,
absolutely. It's part of manhood.
Yeah. No, all right. So let's jump on to the next one, mate, because we're getting some valuable information here that I think a lot of people, and I suppose it's something as a man too, we're conditioned where you don't talk about these things, and very few of us have got friend groups where you can sit down and discuss these things and your own opinions and thoughts on what it means to be a man, and like you've outlined about masculinity. A lot of blokes might think going to the gym, getting themselves a big, gym body and doing the alpha male stuff is what their definition of masculinity is. But if they do a bit more research and comprehend what you're talking about and dive a bit deeper into it, they'll understand that we all possess it. It's just a matter of tapping into it and helping boys become men, I suppose, in today's society where we're shamed being a man.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. We do see in today's world a rise of, what we might call the alpha bros, and we're seeing that the Andrew Tate influence around the world as well, which personally I think the large majority of that is a bad influence. Some of it is good, but the large majority is a bad influence. Look, I don't have any problem with guys who are all about, let's be in the 5 a.m. club, let's get to the gym, let's get fit. Great, do all those things because they help to undergird the rest of your masculine strength. But what we don't want is a message to our young men saying, as long as you've got a jacked body, as long as you're part of the 5 a.m. club, as long as you're an alpha bro, then you're a good man that the world needs. No, those other things should be complementary, not core. The good men that we need is those who are holding tight to this idea of protection, provision, empowerment. They're working hard on their character, their maturity. Here's one, Daniel, that I talk about very, very often. That men, regardless of their age, whether they're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s or beyond, men who make the courageous, tough choice to say, regardless of what happened in my own past, I choose to be the circuit breaker in my own family tree. Just because dad might have been an alcoholic doesn't mean I have to be. Just because dad might have been violent doesn't mean I have to follow those steps. Just because dad might have been absent or emotionally unavailable, whatever was problematic in the past, every man has the power on the inside to say, well, for the sake of my kids, I might not have received it, but I am going to make sure that my kids do receive it. And to become a circuit breaker in your family tree, it's one of the most powerful masculine things any man can ever do.
Mate, that's well said. And just personally, I was what I suppose most would describe as a delinquent before I had children. I was a run amok, just doing my own thing, floating through life. But from the very first second I laid eyes on my firstborn child, I felt an inner shame of the person I was, and I vowed to change what I stood for, and I did not want the person that I was then. And in the face of adversity, you will find your true purpose in life as a man, I believe.
Absolutely.
Some of us have to be put through the ringer, unfortunately, but you do come out the other side, and you come out a far better, I suppose, a far better attribute to society, because you just want to uplift other people that have been in these situations and try and make them see that, okay, it's bad now, but it's not going to last forever. Just keep going.
Absolutely.
Forward, and things will turn eventually, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, well done to you, mate. Congratulations for making that choice, because, it is a hard choice, but the thing we want men to hear is it's a possible choice. You can change your trajectory. Just because you came from a certain somewhere doesn't mean you have to continue that same, compass point. And as you say, the pivotal moment of seeing your first child born, that's a pretty big inspiration to turn your life around and say, well, it's not about me anymore. And whatever has been difficult in my past, I'm either going to have to get help, get healing, bury it, ignore. I've got to do something, because I can't afford to amplify that into my children's future. And if we could get more men, especially young men, realizing that message to say, listen, you might not have had the greatest upbringing to varying degrees, but there's actually a power in your manhood to change tomorrow. And look, maybe if we get more men who choose to be circuit breakers, then in another generation or two, we won't be talking about fatherlessness. We might be talking about the renaissance of great fathering in society. But somewhere along the line, one generation has got to make the call and say, I'm not going to continue it. I'm going to be a circuit breaker. Whether it's a small thing that's got to change in the family tree or a huge thing, everyone can do it.
Yeah, no, well said. All right, how can we build resilience in the face of adversity in today's society? And again, I come back to the point of, do you think this is something we need to get louder, we need to get more numbers on board, and we need to reinstate mutual respect for men by getting out into public that, like you touched on before, not all men are bad, not all women are good, vice versa. It doesn't take a gender to describe whether or not you're a bad person or not. But for some reason, there seems to be this societal perception that all men are these potential rapists and all women are these vulnerable victims. I mean, how do you see we break that and restore faith in men and women?
Yes, no, it's a great question. Look, there's a few things that I would respond to with that. The first one that I see is we need the shared usage of intelligent, considered language. One of the things that we see going on, especially in what I call the lamestream media, those people love to behave like peacocks. Their feathers are out all the time with their bravado about how amazing they are. But often I will sit back and listen to them. I think, not only are they not that articulate or intelligent, but they actually are lauded for what is really lazy language structure that doesn't have good definition and good meaning. And so what happens is people hear their language, and language always creates a certain picture. And those people who are not thinking clearly, they just eat it up like rotting cabbage. They hear this language like, toxic masculinity that we touched on, or, this chant that comes out of feminist circles, stop saying it's not all men. And those of us with a brain are sitting back going, but it's not, because what happens is there are catchphrases and little mantras that grow traction in social media. And so language gets hijacked. So we need shared, intelligent language that is courageous enough to speak up and say, I don't care if people dislike me for this. This is actual truth and it needs to be said. That's part of what you and I and others are trying to do. The other thing we need that is less about the collective voice is this stuff has to start on an individual level. And so we touched a moment ago around, fatherlessness, and we could extrapolate that out into mentoring and coaching and role modeling and prototyping. One of the reasons we see a decreasing resilience in our young people today is because of the removal of the masculine presence in the family home. It's just a fact of life that the feminine nature is more nurturing, more compassionate. No, I'm not saying that they are stuck in that box, but they were beautifully designed that way. Yeah. So when children fall over in the playground, mums want to cuddle the kid. Dad wants to say, get up, walk it off, you'll be okay. Yeah. And neither is wrong. Both are good when they're in complement with one another. But when you remove masculinity from that upbringing, you get a very, very soft and cuddly and compassionate and nurturing environment the children are raised in. And then you pair that with what we're seeing go on in the world today, where everybody can see everybody else's life in the palm of their hand. I don't know how old you are, Daniel, but I know when I was growing up in the 80s, we didn't know everything about everyone else's life. You barely heard anything from the other side of the world, so you got on with your own stuff. Whereas these days, kids are growing up with images in front of them on their screen that are convincing them you can be a celebrity, you can be filthy rich, you can make $10,000 a month by working 3 minutes a day, and all these lazy messages that don't actually add up to a well-formed character. And so you take this combination of remove the masculine message from the family home, combined with an easy and greasy sales pitch around how luxurious and hedonistic your life can be, and you end up with a very low tolerance for resilient behavior, which is very, very sad for our young men especially. It's sad for our girls as well. The reason why I say it's especially sad for our young men is because you touched on this before. A boy doesn't know how to become a man in the absence of struggle. Yeah. He needs masculinity to bestow masculinity. It's just a fact of life. A woman cannot bestow manhood on a boy. It's not within them to do it. In the same way that I can't bestow femininity on my daughter. That's my wife's job, right? So masculinity is bestowed by other men. But what we see happening is young men who have struggle and difficulty and adversity removed from their early years, and so they don't learn to build the muscles of grit and determination and sticking at it and doing what is right, because right matters just as much as reward. And so it's a whole field of conversation, that one, but it's highly valid because we've got to have it if we want to raise the next generation of young men into good, strong men. Because I don't know, you probably have the same belief as me, but if we don't get this nailed in the next 10, 20, 30 years, people think they've seen chaotic anarchy right now. Wait till you see what we see in 30, 40 years if we don't get this issue sorted out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't even think we've got that long, Andrew. I think that the clock's ticking, mate. We need to get things...
It is.
And the thing is this, like you've touched on there, but boys can't become men without a role model of what a man actually looks like.
100%.
Sometimes it's an uncle. Sometimes it's a friend's father. Sometimes... But more and more now, we've got these single mother homes. And I'll just touch on this because it's my pet hate, is that the family court jurisdiction has purposely targeted family units, and predominantly they hand down gender-driven orders that remove mainly the father out of the household, as we've touched on, and then the repercussions for the future generations are children that are left without discipline, without consequence, and they basically... I think they spend their life looking for something they should have had a part of growing up that was stolen from them by government legislation that hides behind the title of in the child's best interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you've raised two very powerful points there that, again, we should keep echoing this as often as we can. The first one is our family court system, as well as the political landscape, as well as mainstream media, etc. There's a lot of areas, but our family court system has a false core belief running through it. And this is what we've got to target, and this is what we've got to change. The false core belief is this: a child will be no worse off in life in the absence of their father, or, the same statement said differently, a single mother is just as capable of raising boys and girls without a male presence as they would be if the male was there. Those core beliefs are evil in their origin. They are false in their application, and the damage it's doing to children is presently limitless. And so we have to be strategic as men. We've got to go after where the actual original seed of the problem comes from. No doubt we see by the thousands, men and families and children, their lives being turned upside down. But we've got to really start to get some artillery aimed at the core problem. The core problem is a false belief that a child's life will be essentially the same upbringing with or without a father present in their upbringing. That is so wicked in its origin and obvious in its destruction, and that's the belief we've got to target. And the other thing that you raised that is powerfully true is there are situations where, despite everybody's best efforts, dad still isn't around. Dad might have died young. Dad might have been an immature, unformed man when he conceived his first child and took off and ran away and was never present. There are difficult circumstances despite our best efforts. And in that situation, this is why we desperately need as many of the other men as possible to make it and not end their life. Number two, to keep growing themselves and pursuing their purpose, because probably somewhere down the road in their journey, if they stick at it as a teacher, as a coach, as a community worker, as a member of some group in society, they are going to be standing in front of the opportunity to be the male role model in a son's life that is not biologically their son. And to do so is one of the most powerful things you can ever do, to be present in the life of a young man who hasn't got his own dad around, but show what it means to have good character, to be strong, to be courageous, to have resilience, how to treat a woman, how to raise a family. We are so desperately in need of that.
Yeah, no, well said, mate. And the thing is this too, I think, just touching quickly on that, 47 men a week, in my opinion, are being politically and legally coerced, like we touched on previously about certain parts of the agenda that I think are being pushed. And the sad reality is that the destruction of the family unit, I truly believe this. I spent 8 years in family court, and the only best interest of the child that takes place in there is before you ever get there. Because once you get there, the animosity that's created makes it impossible for these children to come out untainted, untraumatized. It's something that, and then sadly, I believe it's a generational thing too, because we touched on this before, that society's got this perception now that for young girls, you only need a man to have a child. You don't need a father to help raise it. And we're seeing the destruction of society where you've got children pushing children in prams. You've got young men turning to drugs and alcohol. They're clearly taking their own life at massive amounts of levels. And I've reached out on many occasions to many politicians, and the sad reality is that the response I get is, if you talk about men's or fathers' issues, then it's a political suicide. They don't want to know. They put their head in the sand, the ostrich effect, I call it, and they just don't want to engage in the conversation. And I mean, recently we've seen a special envoy for men's health being implemented in the portfolios. And I just, personally, I think it's a backhanded compliment. If you do not want to implement a minister for men, take away the minister for women, make a minister for people that's more inclusive for everybody to be able to engage, and stop the divisive rhetoric that's trying to label men certain ways and women others. What's your
absolutely
portfolio, Andrew?
Yeah, it's a big one. And look, everyone who has got their brain engaged can see the need for it. It's not difficult to see the need. I tend to come from a reasonably, a reasonably aggressive internal position on this. And what I mean is, I think we just need to keep on urging more and more men to refuse silence. And every time there's a rejection of this message, men, as best they can, need to internally multiply that and say, I'm going to double down. I'm going to go harder. I'm going to speak louder, because we are not quitting on this until the right thing is done. The hard part of that is that usually the men who are carrying the burden for this message, not all the time, but most of the time, are men who've already been through hell and back on this issue themselves. And so there's an internal fatigue that is real, where men have been fighting and warring on this stuff for so long. And when you, like anything in life, you get kicked in the teeth enough times, eventually you get a little bit shy of copping another kick in the face. And so we need each other's strength, so that when some men need to pull back and take rest because they're at the end of their rope, other men actually step into the breach, which is part of what I'm trying to do, whether it's the issue of parental alienation or families breaking down, or men needing role models and fathers in their life, or the role of men for raising young girls as well. Whatever the issue is, I'm trying to step into that breach as someone who hasn't had to walk that hellish path, thank God. I've got so much empathy and compassion for all people, and especially men who've been through the family court system and are still going through the devastation of that. And I say to them constantly as they're reaching out to me that I don't know how they keep going, because the road they've been asked to walk is one that you wouldn't ask your worst enemy to walk, because it's so hard. And so individual fatigue is a very real issue. And so we need more men, and I think in particular the men who haven't had to burn years of energy on this issue, more of those men getting in the game for their brothers and saying, this is unacceptable, this is not good enough, we are destroying ourselves from the inside, and put so much pressure on politicians and others that they cannot ignore it. Now, that could be a multi-year, multi-decade war, and it kind of has been already. But there is no other choice but to continue to go to the front line of that, because I can assure you, and you know this, if men quit on that message, there is nobody else in society that's coming to wave this flag for us. That's the reality. And so we've got to keep on waving it. And you made this really interesting point that I think gets almost no air coverage, and it needs to. And this is this idea where we are seeing a new generation of young women they're like a new breed, where they are coming through their teens with this notion of, I only need a man to make a child. I don't need a man to raise a child. Yeah. Now, this is scary, but it also fascinates me, because earlier in our chat, I used this metaphor of the idea of a false belief in the family court system that was like a seed. Well, these young women who are now saying, I don't need a man to raise a child with me, those young women are becoming the earliest stage fruit of that seed that was planted years and years ago, that we now have young women who are coming through with, in their thinking, the normalized belief that you can raise a child, be they male or female, without the presence of a father, and it will make negligible difference. They actually believe it. And this should scare all of us, that singular seed that was planted in legislation decades ago has now become green shoots that's turned into a full-blown tree that is bearing the fruit in our young people of, you can raise a great family without being in partnership. And it's a false, wicked, evil lie that continues to multiply the damage to generations of children. And so we have a big task in our hands, and we've got to stick at it.
Yeah, we do, mate. And you're right. I think, and they come from generational alienated children. That's the sad thing, is that, the UN come out with parental alienation is what disgruntled fathers use when they lose custody in the family court. No.
Yes.
Parental alienation is a very real form of child abuse. It involves gaslighting. It involves manipulation. And the sad reality is it very much aligns itself with the Stockholm Syndrome, where predominantly these children end up aligning with their abusers. And even though they know the narrative's false, they still can't break the shackles of that, and they end up stuck in that situation where they're falling in line with the person that is the abuser, and it's a sad reality they're creating in society, mate, isn't it?
100%. It's what we touched on before, this idea of prototyping and role modeling. Generally, what a child sees in their upbringing is what they believe to be true about the world.
Yeah.
And that comes down to everything, even into things like how far they travel from their family home. If they never leave the 4 square block of where they grow up, they believe that that's what the whole world looks and exists like.
Yeah.
And so this is the whole point of why men choosing to be the circuit breaker is so crucial to kickstart a new internal DNA, if you like. You know, you could have had horrible, nasty, violent men in your whole family tree as far back as you can research it. But if you be the guy who goes, that ends with me, and you draw that line in the sand, you're literally changing the internal DNA of your family tree for generations to come. It's powerful.
It is, mate. All right, we're running out of time, mate. I could talk to you all morning, but I know you're a very busy man. All right, what legacy do you hope that the Man Show leaves for future generations of men and encourages young men to sort of find their inner masculinity without feeling any shame for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to inspire other men. That's the whole point. I want to inspire other men to believe that they matter, that their voice is heard, that their story is important. I want to inspire other men to realize that they can get through their war and their challenge, get to the other side. I want to inspire men to believe that they were put on the planet with a purpose, that they're not an accident. They've got something important to do in their life's journey and they need to discover it. And I want men to realize what I wrote in one of my recent newsletters. I wrote this article that I called Magnificent Masculinity. And that's an entirely new concept in today's world that people almost go cross-eyed when they hear it because they go, what do you mean? We've been taught that masculinity is either bad or unimportant. I know, that's the point. I want to bring a renaissance of the truth. So those would be some of the ways I'd answer that question. I want to inspire men to be courageous and stand up and speak up, because if we shrink into a corner like a fading flower, it's already game over for everything that comes after that.
Yeah, and just touching on that, if a man does lose his purpose from personal experience of your family, that doesn't mean you're not going to find a new purpose. That doesn't,
100%.
Keep moving forward. A new purpose will
100%. Without a shadow of a doubt. No, you're spot on. Sometimes I would even go further and say that some men, some people, their way to discovering their purpose is actually through pain.
Yeah.
Because the lessons that they acquire during a season that they didn't ask for and didn't want actually begin to point to the direction of why they were put on the planet. And I am an advocate for believing that every single person was created with a purpose, and that's why they're here. There are no accidents.
Yeah. Some of us are put through the ringer, but at the end of the day, you're right. You just hang around, keep moving forward, and things will change. And
that's it.
Save one life. That's a purpose that we can all sort of focus on and help someone else get through the shit we're being put through ourselves. So
absolutely.
No, mate, I can't thank you enough for your time. I've been wanting to
Pleasure.
a long time. I've been a long time fan, sorry. And for anybody that truly wants to tune in, The Man Show, I've seen you on TikTok and YouTube, and I think that, as we've touched on, the more numbers we get, the more men, and for lack of a better analogy, the more men that are not socially castrated, that will be willing to have a public opinion outside the political narrative, I think The Man Show is a great place to start, mate. So thanks again.
Absolutely.
For those point of view for what you do. And I look forward to talking to you again, Andrew. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Great to chat.
Thanks, mate.